my fundamental kind of principles as a leader of the organization is that each person on my team, and I've had this feeling about it ever since kind of my, one of my earliest levels. Every person on my team, they have their own business to run. And that's their business to run. And it's my responsibility to make sure they have all the tools and the resources that they need to get that done, and that I remove the obstacles that prevent them from doing it.
Welcome to the Unleashing Leaders podcast, where we work with willing leaders to accelerate the changes you seek. We'll learn from the experiences of different leaders facing real challenges and distill practical, purposeful steps to apply in your context. I'm Lee Scott, your curious co-pilot. Together, let's make positive changes for our companies and communities. Welcome back to the Unleashing Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Lee Scott. Super excited to be reconnecting with everybody here. A little personal update. I want to apologize for a little bit of the delay in some of the episode streams. I had the passing of my father quite unexpectedly. But this is a gentleman, his name's Richard Scott. He got me into leadership when I was 13 years old. He is a big believer in second chances, in the undying faith and the human spirit. And so I'm super excited to be recording this episode in honor of him with our good friend, Michelle. She is the CEO of the Televerde Foundation, and she's also the Chief Impact Officer for Televerde, which I'll let her tell us a little bit more about their mission and their impact to those on the show here. So Michelle, great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Lee. It's great to be here.
Michelle, it is so great to have you on the show. Please tell us a little bit about the mission and impact of the Televerde Foundation.
So the Televerde Foundation, you almost can't talk about the Televerde Foundation without talking about Televerde first. So Televerde is a for-profit business-to-business sales and marketing agency that was founded 30 years ago based on the idea that giving women in prison jobs and training and education, we could build a profitable business while providing them with the marketable skills necessary to transition back into the community successfully. So an organization that started as a single wide trailer on a prison yard in downtown Phoenix has now evolved to 7 call centers in women's correctional facilities in Arizona, Indiana, and Florida, employing about 400 to 450 women at any given time in sales, marketing, and technical administration roles in support of some of the biggest technology companies in the world. Companies like SAP, Adobe, Honeywell, Boeing, General Electric, big, well-known companies are outsourcing their sales and marketing needs to our organization, and in turn, providing the women the opportunity to earn and learn and develop careers for the future. And so after 25 years of being in business, we really started to recognize that, hey, wait a second, we're having a really good impact. It wasn't just, we intuitively know, we experienced women transitioning back into the community, buying houses, reuniting with their families, reuniting with their children, graduating from college, and simply not returning to prison.
And for those who aren't as familiar with this, Michelle, the normal experience of somebody released from prison, I think anybody who's not associated with the industry would think, there ain't no way I'm ever going back. But what is the recidivism rate without your program? How many people end up actually back in a justice-involved relationship?
Yeah, well, so that's the thing about incarceration, right? It's generational and it's recidivism. There's a word for it. And it is, depending on what population you look at and over what period of time, it ranges anywhere from about 28% will return in 3 years to 82% of people will return to prison with new charges within 8 years. And the thing is the biggest predictors for recidivism is joblessness and low income. And people with a criminal record, they have an unemployment rate 5 times the national average. In fact, for those lucky enough to get a job after they get out of prison, 1 full calendar year after release, their average earnings is only about $14,000, $15,000. Can't really live on that.
You put them in a situation where, they're trying to get back on their feet, made some different choices. but you're in a survival situation, and the stress and the worry and the anxiety that does not bring out the best in anybody. And then, you end up getting what you get, but you are telling us the benefits. I just wanted to frame that because you've done this for 25 years. You believe it and you know it, you see it. But I mean, for those that aren't familiar with it, you guys, this is the norm of our justice system. And you guys have cracked that code, and you're creating a viable pathway to home ownership, meaningful, purposeful careers, reuniting with their family, building new family, contributing to this their society around them. So tell us more about the impact that you've been seeing. So I just wanted to give a contrast, right, to what's normal versus like, well, that's not a big deal. You're like, no, that's freaking remarkable.
It's a remarkable deal, right? So if 82% of people go back to prison within 8 years, when you learn about what we're doing, you realize it makes a huge difference. So in 2018, we did a social economic impact study through Arizona State University, and they confirmed what we intuitively knew. And that was that at that time, the 3,100 women who had worked for Televerde, they had gotten out of prison. They were reporting 94% employment all the way up to 5 full calendar years after incarceration. They were earning salaries 4 times the national average for a formerly incarcerated woman. Their recidivism rate was less than 6%. So specifically, 5.4% was all that had gone back to prison. And the thing is that what we also knew was that 60% of women in prison are mothers of children under the age of 18. And the study told us that the women of Televerde, for their children, they were 11 times less likely to become justice involved themselves.
Breaking that generational cycle, like you said.
Yeah. And so we really felt empowered that, hey, we have the secret sauce here. We know what we're doing, and we need to do more of this, and we need to reach more people, because over the 25 years that I've been involved with the organization, I watched our incarceration rate in this country increase exponentially. So as a country, we're number 1 in incarceration with over 2 million people behind bars right now. And that's, doesn't really give you context, but for context, it's 1 in 2 people have an immediate family member that's currently or formerly incarcerated. So that's a lot of people that we've chosen to incarcerate in our country. And so we just knew that we had a better way. And at the same time, companies were struggling with low, difficulty finding talent, right? Unemployment rates pre-COVID and now yet again are, 3.5%. Companies, there's 13 million jobs available and only 6 million people looking for work. And right, companies are in need of talent, and where to find it.
We got to start thinking a little more creatively about some of those things. And to your point, incarceration or not, at some point, they've served their time, and we're ready to reintegrate. And so let's build that pathway to employment with somebody that's probably got a huge passion and drive to want to be able to succeed. And you guys have found a way to be able to open an avenue for that with some very big names and big companies. Well, focus a little bit on you now then. So that's the company that you've contributed to over the last 25 years. And you've seen, like you said, over 4,000 success stories at Televerde. Now, tell us about the Televerde Foundation. So how has that expanded beyond, and what is that doing a little differently than the parent company?
Well, and so that was kind of the impetus for it was, first and foremost was, how do we make sure that the women who work for Televerde have the opportunity to get out of prison and be as successful as possible? What supports and services, wraparound services can we provide for them, including, employment, job placement, post-release education, and continued development? Because as a company, these women work for us for anywhere from a year to 10 years or even more while they're incarcerated. And they are earning very good money. They're paid very well for their work while they're in there. But even still, we felt we owed it to them to make sure that they had the support that they needed. So that was, job 1 for the Televerde Foundation. And then job 2 was, how do we take our secret sauce and how do we reach more people more broadly? And so I was asked to start the foundation in March of 2020. Matter of fact, I accepted the idea on March 1st of 2020. And then we all know what ensued after that.
A great time for transformation.
Great time for transformation. But, oddly enough, I tell people this all the time. COVID was probably the best thing that ever happened in this space. because it would force people in general to rethink the way that we did business, the way that we communicated, and doing this virtually became the norm. And so then in turn, that forced the prison systems to think about how we did more things virtually. And by virtue of my existing relationship that I had through the Televerde side of the business, I was able to go in and start launching programs inside prisons virtually, video, right? All of that at a time when nobody was going to prisons, right? You couldn't go and visit a prison. You barely, you could barely get on an airplane. So that forced me to think about how I could deliver meaningful programming to women in new and unique ways across the country without the ability to travel or to send people in.
Well, necessity continues to be the mother of invention. Everybody complains about scarcity and adversity, but that's where all the great ideas come from. So, well, what a great time to expand out. And like you said, not just for those that can be immediately employed, but to build those, critical thinking, emotional intelligence, the self-efficacy skills, right? To be able to find other pathways to employment.
Yeah. So that's exactly what we did. So first we launched that reentry program for the women of Televerde, and then it was like on to the next thing, right? Like how do we build something that can reach more people? And so May 1st, 2021, we launched the first workforce development center here in Arizona. And it was a pilot to see if we could make it work. And generally the idea was, could we go in and replicate that Televerde work experience without an actual job? So could we go in and teach and train and educate and provide that personal and professional development as well as skills and education to basically treat that whole person so that they could walk out of prison with the knowledge, the skills, the confidence, and the ability to be able to be successful. And so turned out like the first pilot was like, hey, this is promising. And we got a little bit more money and said, oh, this is really promising. This is actually working. And so now where we are today, on 1st of January, we will be launching, oh my goodness, cohorts 15 and 16 here in Arizona. We'll be on cohort 12 in Indiana. So 28 cohorts.
You're getting close to what, 500 graduates, something like that?
We're actually over 500. 501 women have participated in the program.
Yeah. Okay. That is an update. Okay. I'm glad we recorded today.
I just got that count yesterday, as a matter of fact. And then we've also launched that reentry program that we built for the women of Televerde. There's lots of people in prison that have other jobs that can benefit from that. So we've been providing that reentry program for women that are involved in other workforce programs throughout the prison. So we've had 550 women transition back into the community.
Okay, Michelle, I hope this isn't a setup. The last time we prepped on this, you had a number for the Televerde Foundation graduates. What's the recidivism rate for your graduates so far?
We are less than 1%.
Wow.
540 women have gone through our program, and it breaks my heart to say, and everybody says,
you guys were at zero. You had zero. You're holding that line, and then
holding that line, right? So that's what we're doing. The women have got 96% employment. They our average starting salaries are close to $40,000. They are just not going back to prison. And so
that's what they need. That's what we need. That's what companies need. That is officially a win-win-win. And, you picked up a passion for this. What were you watching, like YouTube, and you got hooked on this? Like, where did this passion come from, Michelle? What's your origin story that got you into this?
Yeah, well, so look, it wasn't always this way. I think, the one thing I always say is when you ask a little girl what she wants to do when she grows up, the one thing she never says is, I want to go to prison. But that's exactly what happened to all of the women that we're currently supporting. And that's exactly what happened to me. Matter of fact, it was 22 years ago that I was released from the Arizona State Prison. So I was a gal who got really good at making really bad decisions. And until the day I stood in front of the judge and, he told me the words I'll never forget. And that was that I was getting a 7-year sentence. And, for me, when I got there, I was devastated. I'd never known anybody who'd been to prison. I didn't know anything about prison, but I had a really good counselor who gave me the best advice of my life. And he told me I could use my time however I wanted. I could spend it worrying about how to fit in. I could spend it worrying about what other people thought about me. Or I could use the time to turn my life around and become a better version of myself. And so that started a journey of self-development and personal and professional development and healing. And as I said before about our women, right, treating the whole body, what I needed to do mentally, spiritually, physically, emotionally to get right and get out of prison and put my life back together one piece at a time.
Wow. Well, the amazing gumption and resilience that you demonstrated to do that at a time when this type of a program wasn't quite really up and fully running, right? And to be able to know like, hey, I got out, but I'm going to punch a hole in that wall and make it as wide as I can for as many other folks to be able to recover and rebound as gracefully and as powerfully as you did. Well, thank you for sharing that with me. I mean, that sounds like it's a knock on your resume. To me, I think that's where your superpower comes from, right? All leaders, sometimes it's the most challenging and difficult situations. And I'm saying this to our early career listeners, right? You're in a dark spot in your career, facing some personal adversity. Maybe you're facing health challenges and you're like, what the crap? I don't deserve this. And really look at that, embrace that's where that will be your source of strength later in your career, right? I mean, would you say that that's been your experience and your observation, Michelle?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So you look, it wasn't always an easy road. When I got there, like I said, I worked on myself and I heard about this company called Televerde. Story was that it was a little tiny company in the desert in Arizona, and you could get a job there and make money. And if you were really good at it, you get a job at the corporate office when you got out. And to me, that was kind of my golden ticket. And so I got the job. But when I got there, what I found was, well, besides the fact it turned out I was pretty good at the work, there was somebody there who believed in me at a time when I could barely believe in myself. So the CEO of the company, we were a small company at the time, the CEO of the company, he took interest in me and encouraged me and coached me and mentored me. And so when the time came, I got out of prison and I had a job waiting for me. So lucky individual, right? It was not the norm.
Well, it's funny. You every guest I have in this show talks about how lucky they were for that moment, and it is true. I mean, you were lucky, and all of us were lucky that made it out. It's a miracle that any of us are alive. When you look at the massive extinction events that have happened on this planet, but you also had to be open to it. And you had to be willing to receive what was being offered there. And you saw that. It might have been a pinprick of light, but girl, you saw it and you went after it. And so I think it's a two-way street for that luck to manifest. There's got to be opportunity and there's got to be initiative. And you really demonstrated both. And you said something there, Michelle, that I think applies to any leadership role, right? Whether you're the head lifeguard and you're 16 years old, or you're a counselor helping a newly incarcerated woman try to, figure out what she's going to do with the next 7 years. All of us are going to blow the next 7 years, more or less, right? Some of us may not get that, but for those that have, you're going to blow 7 years, and it's, what are you going to do with it? But you said something where that CEO at the time believed in you when you couldn't believe in yourself, right? And you've now turned that around into your superpower, where you, as a leader of this organization and now the extension with the foundation, is believing in the possibility of these women, knowing it's not certain, right? It's not 100% game. Very rarely do any of us play games that are 0 and 100, right? But you believe it when maybe the system doesn't believe it, when they don't believe it themselves. And I think that's fundamental to every leader. And I think that's what differentiates a leader. A follower is somebody who can only believe what they see, but a leader has to believe it before they see it. And I think that is the signature differentiator for somebody that chooses to wear that band that says, I'm going to be a leader. And you experienced that, and you've now given it back 1,000-fold, Michelle, literally 4,000-fold.
Well, and I think, that's our obligation, right? If you choose to take the seat, if you decide that's the journey that you want to be on, part of the responsibility is how you build and empower and lift up other people. right? That's what being a leader is about. It's not about me and my career, right? In the early days, it was all about me and my career when I first came, right? How did I build a career that was going to enable me to take care of my family, to have a better life? And then it became about, right, like the status of the promotions, right? Making it to the director level. And then it was like, okay, well, I want a seat at the grown-up table, right? I want to be an executive, right?
When you get to the grown-up table and you're like, this sucks. I want to go back to the kids table.
Yeah, right. And so, right. And then it was once I became the first woman to join the executive team that came from the incarcerated population to now I want my C-suite, right? So then, ultimately making that journey, as I always say, from cell block to C-suite. Once I was there, it was like, guess what? It's not about you and your career anymore. It's about, right? Everything for me now is not defined about any awards or recognition or acknowledgement or anything that I get. To me, everything that defines my success at this point in my career forward is really every time I log onto LinkedIn and I see somebody who once worked for me or right that was part of my journey in a meaningful way and they just got promoted to vice president or they just got their first director job or whatever it was. I mean, like those promotions on LinkedIn, those notifications are such a blessing for me because that's where I see like that's what this is about, is how I've turned around and said, hey, let me give you a hand up. Let me show you the way. Let me give you a piece of advice, whatever I can do to help the next person achieve their goals.
Well, I like how you characterize that evolution of a person, really, but a person in a leadership roles, but going from that, the certainty and the significance, and that's more self-focused. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. It motivated you. You did some great things with it, but how it evolves into contribution and impact, and seeing that ripple effect of your little rock in the pond radiating out to all the edges of the pond. And that's actually more fulfilling than a title, right? So super cool.
I think a lot of the drive for the title and the advancement in my place was trying to overcome the stigmas of my past. How did I ever prove that I was good enough, right? I saw him walking around with a scarlet letter. So how do I ever prove to anybody else or to even to myself that I'm good enough and that I'm worthy, that I actually deserve this seat at the table?
Yeah. Well, Michelle, only women who have been incarcerated have ever had that "am I good enough" question, right? It never applies to people who haven't been incarcerated.
Everyone.
What are you talking? What? Okay, well, it's only women and it can't be men. Of course, it's women, it's men. Like almost everybody I know, myself included, at some point struggled with that. Am I good enough? We just saw the new Inside Out, the movie that talks about the different emotions and whatnot. And it's the main character is a teenager, right? And she's dealing with that. Wait a minute, I'm not good enough, right? And it's that, and we've all had that moment in our lives where we bring that doubt. And that's what I like what you were saying earlier about your guys' programming, is it isn't just the competencies, although those are certainly important. It's also the confidence. And you don't have to be perfect to be valuable, right? You can be still learning and still be good, right? And I think this notion that if we just beat ourselves down enough, then we'll rise and be great. And it's like, how about we lift each other up to rise and be great? So what were some things that helped you? Because every title you got, you thought it would fill that bucket. And you're like, okay, once I get the directorate, then I'll have proven that I'm good at. Once I'm in the C-suite, once I'm the now the foundation CEO, like all those things were a shallow fulfillment for the answer that was always inside, which was you were good enough. So when did you really start to hear and believe yourself that Michelle, not only good enough, you're pretty kick ass?
It's it actually kind of brought tears to my eyes as I started to think about it. I think you feel it and you believe it, and then something happens and it goes away, right?
It's slippery.
Yeah. It's very slippery. You feel like you're there, and then something happens, and then you get to the next level, right? Like these new challenges. It's just like when I was asked to start the foundation, I was like, I don't know anything about running a nonprofit. Like I have no idea what I'm doing here. So then it was like, I'm studying, I'm learning, and I'm trying new things. And striving to be successful in this new role. And all the while, I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing. Any moment now, somebody's going to realize I don't know what I'm doing, right?
Yeah. And they're going to throw me out. I'm going to be unemployed, and then I'm going to get back in trouble, and I'm going back to the slammer, right?
Right. I don't catastrophize quite that bad anymore, but yeah. So so those feelings of doubt and insecurity, I mean, they come all the time, and even sitting in this seat now, I've been in this seat going on 4 years. When things are happening in the organization, and I'm like, oh, I've never been here before, right? I'm now responsible for all the lives of the families of the women who work for me today, right? As an entrepreneur and in a CEO position. And not only that, I'm responsible for all those women in the program. And what if we don't have enough money? And right. So then all those doubts. But when I think about the moment, my crowning moment when I was like, okay, like get over your imposter syndrome. I'll tell you the story because it's funny. So I was in a meeting, and you know how you're sometimes checking emails when you're in a meeting, because it's not that great of a Zoom meeting. And I get this email from somebody at Arizona State University, and attached to it is a letter. And I open the letter and I read it, and it's informing me that I'm being inducted into the Arizona State University W.P. Carey Hall of Fame. And I read this thing. My immediate reaction is, I happen to be known the former dean of the school, she's not the dean anymore, is to text her and say, Amy, I'm sure this is a mistake. Like, this wasn't meant for me, right? It's like, what? And then I'm like, okay, maybe it's just donation season. And they just, right? I'm alumni. So the underpinnings of it is, after I came home, I went to ASU to get my MBA. And when I started at school there, when I got my acceptance letter there, I remember specifically reading that I had been accepted to the school and thinking to myself, as girls like me don't belong at places like this, right? Like this has got to be a mistake. I don't belong in a place like this. And I went through my 2 years of my MBA, and I never shared about my background, right? It was still my dirty little secret. And I graduated. And so when I got my frame of reference and I went in and I Googled like this ASU Hall of Fame thing, and I saw the other people that had gotten it, I was like, ooh, this is a big deal. That might be a big deal. So I think that's probably the moment in like the whole entire journey for me, that one particular thing, because it was so tied up in my past doubt of myself that I didn't belong there, to have them, how many of your years later, 15 years later, give me that kind of recognition. I was like, okay.
Well, it's interesting because it wasn't a title and it wasn't a career thing. It was what you just said. It was recognition, right? And it didn't come with a pay bump. It didn't come with a new office. It was purely, it was a community-based recognition for your contributions. And I mean, you're very intelligent. Your brain can come up with really elaborate reasons why that's not the, you were saying, is this donation season? Like, and I think we all do that. It's, when we have those doubts and we have those moments of hesitation, we can come up with really elaborate schemas why, and convince ourselves that we're not worthy. And I think, in small doses, to your point, it's actually, there's a reason it's there, right? It actually is beneficial because that doubt sometimes drives us, right? It helps us think about the future, helps us anticipate and maybe plan for some risks. So I think imposter syndromes get a bit of a bad rap. It's like, it's actually not a bad thing to have. It's just not the only thing you want to have, right? And being able to say, okay, now what do I do with it? And by golly, you know what? I do have something I can bring here, and girls like me belong just fine right here. And here's the proof in the pudding.
Well, and it was, for me, it was like, you know what? Like, this is how we get more girls like me into places like this.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and it takes the leader, right? The leader's got to go first. And if it's been done before, it ain't leading, right? So, truly pioneering and go there where there isn't evidence for it. It isn't, if you're not scared out of your freaking mind, you're not leading. So I think that kind of comes with the territory, but that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that moment. So now that you're perfect and you've got everything all figured out, right? You conquered the imposter syndrome, but like you said, it always comes back. It doesn't go away. It just becomes a part of the committee, not just a dictator. But let's talk about another syndrome, Michelle. One that you and I think, still are struggling with, and we can have a little therapy together. So there's imposter syndrome, then there's founder syndrome. All right. So tell us a little bit about what the founder syndrome is for you and how that's showing up. And, as other leaders enter that phase, let's talk about some things you're doing to address it.
Well, it's complicated. Some days I feel like I got it under control, and some days I don't at all, right? So, like, what is founder syndrome, right? That's what is your succession plan, right? Who else in the organization can do what you're doing? How do you empower others to take the reins? What do you let go of? What do you hold on to? And it's incredibly complicated. And I'm trying to, like, right now, my approach to it, because someday I have to retire. I don't know when, but someday I have to retire. But I also have to figure out how to spend more of my time on the things that I love and the things that I'm really good at, because that's what drives the business forward, right? Like, me personally, spending my time on policies and procedures and, right, operational efficiencies, and, like, don't get me wrong, that's for other people, that's exactly where they need to be. That's not what drives my business forward, right? That slows my business down if I'm spending my time in that type of stuff. One, because it's not my core competency, right? And two, because my core competency is something else, which is my core competency is about how I grow the business, right? How I raise awareness for what we do, how I bring more people in to get involved. And so that's kind of the big thing is figuring out how to bring people, the right people. It's the old Jim Collins Good to Great, right? The right people in the right seats on the bus at the right time, all moving in the right direction. But that's my job, to pick them. I am personally right now, I've been, everybody's familiar with Traction, the EOS Traction, right? Everybody's read it. I'm on kind of the next thing, which is rocket fuel.
Oh, tell us about that.
So rocket fuel is basically what I said, is getting, it's really about the founder, the CEO relationship, whatever that is getting that person working on that which they are most qualified, most valuable, right? In doing that, and having somebody else. And fundamentally, the concept is about getting a chief of staff, give the person whatever title you want, but developing your structure in such a way that I can go use me where I belong. Because I think we all know this. If a good level of self-awareness, when you work on the things that are not your passion, that's where you get burnout.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so looking across this conversation we're having here, Michelle, a common denominator I'm seeing is there is a basis of fear. When you're experiencing an imposter syndrome, you're afraid you're not good enough, right? When you get to be the founder of something, and then you've built it and you've pioneered and you've bled and you've sweat, right? And you've been hurt, right? You made mistakes and you paid the consequences. And now there's the scared changes to, like, I don't want something to go wrong. I don't want something to get hurt. So I got to hold on to it. And I don't want somebody else to suffer, the pains that I did. And I don't want the business to suffer because something didn't get taken care of. So there's still that underlying emotion of fear and anxiety and worry. So that's the common thread. And yet, yeah, of course it's scary, right? Building a foundation is scary. Doing something for the first time is scary. Being responsible for hundreds of other people's potential future livelihoods and generational impacts, that should be freaking you out, right? I think this notion of, like, okay, it doesn't mean don't be afraid. I think it means be afraid, do it anyways, right?
Yeah, exactly. Be afraid, do it anyways. Just take a step. Because look, the founder of Televerde, the CEO and my boss, like, he would say to me all the time, he's like, look, this isn't life or death, right? Nobody's going to die from whatever decision we make today. So make the decision. And then if it's the wrong decision, change it.
Undo it. Yeah. And there was a time where you made the wrong decision and you're still here, right? And I think it has overlaps with parenting too, where, you're like, sometimes I think we're trying to protect others too much. It's like, like you said, you've got somebody on the team. They've got the knack and the spark for the policy and procedure works. If they have a chance to wrench on that, they'll do amazing things, but they're new. They don't really know it yet. So here you are using your offhand, trying to do it to cover it and protect them. And it's like, man, let them get in there, mess up a couple of things, build that proficiency, build that strength. And I think if we can all remember our strength comes from our greatest adversities and our setbacks, then it's not as scary to let somebody else have their adversities and their setbacks. And as long as it's not lethal, like you said, nobody's going to die, then it's okay, right? Like let's calibrate it. Because there are things that are life and death in this world, right? I was an EMT, I'm acutely aware that there are some things that are truly life and death, but let's not apply that level of fear and worry when it's not. Well, that's fantastic. So do you have a recent example of something that you've been able to unleash, your responsibility and hold on it so somebody else has the opportunity to grow and unleash into their superpower? Is there one that you could share as a practical example?
I'm letting the reins out like slowly here and there. I hired somebody on in business development, that's a scary space to be, right? Because that's my strength, right? Is being in business sales and marketing, business development, right? That's my career. That's everything I'm built on. But I can't do it all by myself. So I hired somebody on, and God bless them. Because right when you are, the leader who comes with that expertise and you're trying to bring somebody in behind you, I'm like, no, don't do that. No, that's not, don't do. Then I have to wait, you brought him in because he brought experience. You brought him in because you trust him. So we have to have these conversations. I'm like, okay, let's not make our relationship adversarial, right? And no, I'm not always right. So we have to figure out how to have a healthy debate and all of those things. So, and, sometimes it's really hard, like people who, when you're a small organization, everybody reports to you. And then as you grow, right? And then I was still doing regular one-on-ones with everybody in the company. Okay, can't do that. Stop it. So, little things is, and then of course, like my right hand, she's in the toughest seat in the house because I give things to her, and then when it's not right or when something's wrong, and then I'm like, right. So she has to be. I told her the other day she's kind of like the strainer, right? Because everything that's wrong we pile onto her, and she's got to strain it. So it's working to empower people, but also to let go of control, but also not to just dump. There's a balance, right? Because I could, the things that I really don't like to do, I could just dump and walk away and be like, and then just be frustrated because it's not right. So
yeah, that takes it to the extreme. And I think somebody's like, well, I empower my people. And I'm like, no, you abandon them. Right. That's the dumping. And then it's like, I guide my people. No, you micromanage them. And, it's calibrating that. It's like, is their competence and their confidence at a level that's ready for that next thing? Okay, well, then give them just a bit more than what they can handle, right? Because that's where the growth comes from. And do you guys have like a code word or something like that where she's able to tell you like, nah, boss, like let go of that. I'm taking that, or get out of my business, or I need help. Come and help me. Get in the weeds with me. I need it.
Well, we do. We've had to have, she forgets, right? And a funny story. We were doing a major build here in Arizona. We were placing a modular building on a prison property here in Arizona. And it was a much bigger project than either of us had an understanding of when we got into it. And it was just riddled with problem after problem after problem in the process. And this was a while ago. This was like a year and a half ago. So she was trying to be like, okay, I'm going to own everything. And don't worry, I got this. And she's got it, and she's running hard and fast, and it's too much. And she calls me one day and she starts crying. She's crying. She's so stressed out. She's crying because the fire hydrant and the fire sprinkler and the electrical thing and the this and that. And I'm like, hey, Tammy, look, if I'm getting ready to run a bubble bath and you're crying, we've got a problem in our relationship. You're taking too much, and you're not using me the way that you need to. So my fundamental kind of principles as a leader of the organization is that each person on my team, and I've had this feeling about it ever since kind of my, one of my earliest levels. Every person on my team, they have their own business to run. And that's their business to run. And it's my responsibility to make sure they have all the tools and the resources that they need to get that done. And that I remove the obstacles that prevent them from doing it. Their responsibility in turn is to communicate to me about what they need, where the obstacles are, right? And all of those things. And that's how we do things together. So my team all knows that. And we kind of operate. And so, you know what, they'll call me, hey, I need to talk. Hey, I need help.
I love how you characterize that as really, it's a two-way street, right? It's not just the responsibility of the leader, but that really, if you think it's like, hey, everybody's running their own business, that means they're the leader of their own business. So now there's a mutual respect and a mutual almost obligation to communicate and say, hey, I can take more on. Hey, this is kind of over my head and I'm going to get us in trouble. And, really good relationships have the capacity to have a candid conversation about that, versus like, it's the, I got it. I don't got it. Well, wait a second, right? Like that should have been a few I got it ago. But how do we make it safe to say that? And how do we listen? And then how do we balance it? And, the reality might be none of us got it right now. We're all figuring this out together. And that's okay, because that's where maximum growth and superpower discovery happens. Well, wonderful. Michelle, this has been a really inspiring conversation. I think it's one that's going to put a smile on a lot of folks' faces as they listen to it. I hope they've been doing that as they've gone along and seeing that evolution, from the imposter syndrome to the founder syndrome. I wanted to ask you one closing question, if you don't mind. So kind of putting this all together, whether you're the one that's struggling to find, your place, or you're trying to find the balance in how everybody else's places play to it, what's one of the elements to being able to unleash either yourself or other leaders? Like what would you synthesize out of this conversation to say one thing, if I had to do it all over again, that I would pay more attention to as I'm unleashing myself for others, it would be X. And it doesn't have to be the only thing. It doesn't have to be everything. What's one thing?
I think it's the same thing, right? I think back to the earliest stages of my career, I didn't always do the best job of lifting up and empowering the people on my team, right? So when I was, my first department, and it was still founder syndrome, right? It was learning how to let go, how to trust, how to empower, and then how to celebrate those successes. And, and maybe that piece of it, and making sure that we're celebrating the successes of others in the organization broadly, not just saying, hey, you did a really good job, not just saying, hey, to the closest team members, but really celebrating and making sure other people in the organization know the hard work and the success of others. I think if I look back on my career, that would be some of the regrets of my earliest career is maybe I didn't fully empower people because I didn't trust and I still had fear. And maybe as a result, right, they didn't get as much out of the experience as they could have, or maybe they didn't feel as rewarded and appreciated as maybe they should have. But yeah.
There's a couple of really good nuggets in there. There's the connecting the dots, like you said, like maybe you said it to the person, but you didn't connect the dots to the organization, so making that recognition and then connecting of those things. I think it's so easy as a leader to be on to the next thing, right? Like, okay, that was good. Let's go on to the next thing. We're so future focused, but taking the moment, like you said, to celebrate beyond the immediate praise, but really saying, did you guys see what just happened there? That was pretty, and that puts gas in the tank, right? To keep them in the fight. And then the other is just, fear is going to be part of the equation, people, right? Welcome to the leadership journey. Let it be an ally, not the adversary, and so maybe letting go of some of that a little sooner could have given a few folks maybe the opportunity to grow a little faster, but still a remarkable journey. And now that you know that, you're even more well positioned to help unleash your successors and successors, right? I think the real remark of a leader is it multi-generational, right? Like you talk about disrupting the multi-generational impact of incarceration, while at the same time, you're also spawning a multi-generational of people being able to uplift their children, their families, their coworkers. And that's an inspiring thing to be focused on as a chief impact officer, right? Like that's the impact.
That's awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, appreciate what you're doing for our country. Appreciate what you're doing in those 3 states. Look forward to that program continuing to expand. As you know, full disclosure, we're in conversations to see what we can do to be able to benefit as we continue to face also talent shortages and looking for a workforce that is reflective of the communities that we serve. And one thing we talked about earlier was this notion of let's flip the script. And I think this applies to your business, but it also applies to us as leaders. But rather than being like, well, how can I get them to invest in me? How can I get them to take a risk on me? How can I get them to let me take a chance on this? You know, flipping it to say, you know, like the women workforce that you have, they're the treasure, they're the gold, right? Or you as an early career leader, it's like your open eyes or your creativity, that's the goal. And so it's not about getting other people to give you something. It's about, man, you being able to give something to them. And that flips that script to say, and it's not cocky, but it's focusing on contribution. I think a lot of folks will get that out of this conversation with you today, Michelle.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Lee. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Where can folks stay in touch with you and follow your journey?
I think probably the best and easiest way to find me is to find me on LinkedIn. I respond to everybody who connects with me on LinkedIn in a meaningful way. In other words, you know, if you're just another salesperson trying to sell me something that doesn't relate to my job or my career, I may not respond to you. Honestly, if you connect in with me and you want to learn more about our work, you want to learn more about my journey, you want to just connect and have coffee, a virtual coffee or something, I would be more than happy to. I love to. Nothing makes me happier than to share our work. Nothing makes me happier than to take people to prison. So if you're really interested in what we do and you really want to learn more about it, connect with me and we can make some arrangements to get you involved in some capacity.
Michelle, what's your personal LinkedIn handle and what's your Televerde handle on LinkedIn?
I just have one. It's just Michelle Cirocco. Easy to find. And then, yep, you can find us on the website to learn more. If you'd like to learn more about the call center business, as far as outsourcing and getting some really, really phenomenal sales and marketing and tech talent, televerde.com. And to learn more about the foundation and our work, if you need to hire some amazing talent, we have women who are queued up and ready and looking for work, or if you just like to get involved in some other capacity, whether it's to volunteer or to donate, televerdefoundation.org.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for sharing your story and your humility and your superpowers with us today, Michelle. Really appreciate having you on the show.
Awesome. Thank you, Lee. You have a great day.
Thank you for joining us today on the Unleashing Leaders podcast. Subscribe so you don't miss a moment that could be the key to your next breakthrough. Let's stay connected and contribute together by grabbing that @UnleashingLeaders handle on LinkedIn, YouTube, or your favorite network. This is Lee Scott. Keep learning, loving, and leading. Our future and our communities are counting on us.